So, welcome, or I guess for some of you, maybe this is welcome back. Uh, for those of you who are new here, my name is Jeb Stuart Johnston. I am a nationally board certified health and wellness coach specializing in emotional eating and revamping my Food on the Mind podcast. I have been host of a variety of podcasts over the years, none of which I've stuck with very long term. Currently, you may listen to a podcast I co-host with my good friend Mike Dola, known as the Macro and the Mindset, where we deal with more of the industry of nutrition and fitness. But, I just wanted to return to this. It's been a few years and explain kind of maybe why I took so long in this process and why I have been out of it. And to be honest, uh, sometimes these extracurriculars, I'm a coach. I really enjoy working with people, talking with people, helping them to change their lives. And a lot of the extracurriculars that are required for this job of working from home, such as social media, just became overwhelming. And the necessity of scheduling guests for podcasts and doing things the way that were expected of me from others, it just didn't work for me. And the year I had of 2024 was very transformative, and it's actually what led me back to this. And this time, I'm going to be doing it a little different. So the goal of this podcast this year is really to explore the ideas that I touch on in social media from a much more in-depth place. As we see the growth of a lack of focus and mindfulness and ability to concentrate through this world, we see information that is topical and often, in my mind, silly. The most popular things that I see in fitness and nutrition on the internet are not only um, not involved, but they're also often just wrong. And there's no complexity or no context to get into that. And I'm not one who wants to spend my time fighting with people on the internet, so I choose not to engage. Rather, I would rather sit here and talk to you in depth about the ideas that I have and the way that I help people and the tools that we use in my practice and the challenges that people face. And while I do specialize in emotional eating, this podcast is going to be about a variety of topics, ranging from philosophy to religion and spirituality to social issues. I would say not really politics, but everything is politics. So, of course, that will have some representation within this, although it will not be any overtly political messaging. More so, if you choose to align with a certain party, that's fine. I prefer to align with a certain set of values, and that's how I navigate life and how I'm choosing to navigate life, because otherwise it can become you can become a victim of the outrage machine that is both politics and social media this time. So what occurred to me in 2024 was, when I work with my clients at the beginning of the year, we try to come up with a North Star, a phrase, an idea, a concept that we can come back to in times of stress or struggle. And for last year, my word was curiosity. And it helped me to open up my mind, to be less judgmental, to try things both in business and personally that were very far outside of my comfort zone. It was a tremendous learning experience and an extraordinarily painful year. Had a lot of failures within my work life, career life, not in ways that harmed clients, but financially, I took a pretty big hit, and that was due to the curiosity. I learned because I was curious in the way other people were doing things. I hired other people to kind of take on things that were probably a little too personal for me. And I spent a lot of money in 2024 on things that ended up costing me money and not improving my income. But it was very important to go through that because I had to remember that my path is not the same as everyone else's. And especially when we're talking about the fitness and nutrition industry, I have decided to walk a path that is relatively unique and doesn't really fit a mold. And so, therefore, the tactics used by others, which are really rooted in marketing, don't really work for me. And so, I had to learn that lesson the hard way, as I do with most things. I had to touch the stove to remind myself it was still hot. And yes, it is. And I saw some failures. It was also transformative in my curiosity to attend more events, to see more people, regardless of the content of what those talks were or the events were. It was more about curiosity to see who else is out there and go in with a non-judgmental, open mind. And that was spectacular. I got to meet so many amazing people and connect with people on a deeper level and create relationships that are going to last a lifetime. And it's not networking. It's not about just building business acumen or something like that. No, it was really about connecting with people on a real level because, to be honest, we all need to make money, and I want to earn a living, and I want to earn a comfortable enough living that I can travel and do the things I want and work with the clients that I want to work with. But really, the most important thing to me in my life is connection and relationships. And that is something that I spent much of my life detached from. And so, with this curiosity, with these failures, the thing that I really learned most about myself was that I had really needed to focus on a very logical, grounded part of myself that helped me to develop the model that I use today with clients. But in that process, I really detached from spirituality. And I'll go into this a little bit more when I talk about my life story, but I've come back to a sense of spirituality, and that's not religion in any way, shape, or form. I study various religious texts. I find all of them fascinating. Religion to me is found inside of walls. Spirituality is found all around us. And that's kind of how I look at it. I'm much more interested in how we relate to that which is greater than us. And I don't care if you think of that in terms of God, of nature, of your friends, whatever. It doesn't really matter to me. But how do we relate to those people? And then looking at how religions use, various disciplines, various strategies to achieve that spiritual awakening, for lack of a better term. And I became fascinated with that. I've always been fascinated with both religion and philosophy. And so I spent a lot more time in that part of curiosity. And that also caused both amazing insights and difficult pains. And I think that's really what led me to want to share these things in a context that is less restrained or constrained as social media might be, and less about appealing to a lot of people with pithy and silly statements and more on connecting at a deeper level. As some of you might have followed this podcast or prior ones before, have gotten some of my life story, but if not, this is an introductory episode. And so I wanted to take the time and talk to you a little bit about who I am. Again, I'm a nationally board certified health and wellness coach, but I led a very circuitous route to get here, not very similar to probably anyone else in the industry. There's a few definite weirdos out there like me, and we've all kind of connected and become friends. So you'll see us all together if you're at these conferences. But, me personally, I grew up in an alcoholic and abusive household. That is probably the thing that from a young age molded me more than anything else. I was a very caring and sensitive child that was hardened very quickly through the trials of life that really kids probably shouldn't go through. I remember, one of the first memories I have of exquisite anger was my dog had been either hit by a car or the vet had said maybe hit with a baseball bat. And so I remember being a very, very young child and having this aggressive tendency come out and this anger and vowing that I was not going to be victimized in adulthood the way that I felt I was as a child. and yeah, this sounds heavy. I promise you, it's not. I've gone through a lot of work for this stuff. But growing up in that environment, and also looking back on it now and understanding that my dad had a problem with alcohol, which I would later go on to have as well, and knowing as an adult that my parents did the best they could with what they had. It was still better than what my dad had growing up. And so I think about that a lot of times because that did shape who I became in a lot of ways. And as difficult as that childhood was, I don't think I would trade it for anything in the world because it gave me an insight into the human condition that I would have otherwise maybe not gotten. Because in a lot of other aspects, I lived a very privileged life. We grew up without worrying about money. My dad's family came from, pretty significant, both economic and political and societal, areas of power, for lack of a better term. My mother was kind of a country girl and, came from a very loving family. That is amazing, and they're very different families, but I got a lot of great exposure to people growing up that really would mold my life. Um, but growing up in that household, I lent itself to something that is pretty natural, and that is I became an addict myself. Alcohol was something I gravitated towards early on, and I would spend a veritable lifetime caught in the cycle of addiction. I was, a sad kid. I was an anxious kid. I'm still a little bit anxious. Let's not get too far ahead of the plot. I have a little bit of neuroses. Leaving New York City and moving down here to Charleston, South Carolina, has helped with that some. But I still am, someone who is prone to more neuroticism than the average Joe. But I went through years of alcohol and drug addiction, still being fully functional in a lot of ways. I showed up for work. I still, I was putting in 14-hour days. But it led to a very difficult time in establishing and maintaining relationships with people and friendships. Luckily, my wife Sarah is almost as stubborn as I am, and she really just, really stuck with me and helped keep me going when I probably didn't really have a lot to focus on. I was finding success in careers, but they weren't fulfilling. I grew up, and again, in finding this addiction early on, it almost allowed me to become more personable. It allowed me to connect. It allowed me to kind of be more boisterous. I'm naturally very introverted, and I began to meet people, and especially girls. I found when I was drunk and a little less inhibited, I could talk to girls. And I got to be honest, like, that was about the thing that was most important to me. Why did I want to be an actor and a musician? Well, part of it was I realized early on when I was kind of a small, not like, big or tough or, I was athletic enough, but I wasn't the greatest athlete, but I could sing. And I learned early on that sensitivity, having that, was actually way better than being the jock. Like, it was the superpower. And so I learned to lean into that, and I developed it, and I was actually very good at those things. But I was always after a sense of acceptance and a sense of belonging, and that's why I found myself drawn to that, eventually going to music school. But why didn't I succeed in those careers with something that I think I was pretty good at? And that really did come down to the addiction. It actually was more important to me than finding success in those areas. And if there's one thing that I do is I don't half-ass things. So if I was going to be a drunk, I was going to be the best drunk you've ever seen. I became a bartender. I became a very good bartender. And then I met my wife, and that led to me searching for a little bit more stability in a career, something that would allow me to be home at the same times that she was, since she had a normal job. She was a jewelry designer by trade, and that meant she worked normal hours. So her sister and my roommate at the time were both hairdressers. I thought, hey, that's a cool job. I can be creative. I don't have to go into work until noon, so I can still play shows at night, and I get to wear cool clothes. Like, what's not to like? And it turns out I would spend a lot of time around women listening to their deepest and most personal problems. This would become a theme in my life. Wasn't aware of it at the time, but yeah, that would actually be the thing that would kind of follow me. And, I had worked as a bartender again, so I was used to talking to people. Even though I am introverted, I can do that on a day-to-day basis as long as there's a topic at hand. And so, I moved into hair. I actually found, like everything else, I wasn't satisfied with just being a hairdresser. I needed to be the best. So I began looking for mentors, finding different mentors, agreeing to be like, hey, I'll do whatever. I'll work for free. I'll do whatever it is. Teach me. And I began to learn. I began to connect. And within a few years, I was working, Fashion Week in New York City. I got invited by one of the, biggest hairdressers in New York when I worked for him. He's like, if you ever want a job, come in, you're hired. And so then I went to New York City and began working at Michelangelo's Michelangelo's Wonderland Beauty Parlor as the first and only straight male that's ever worked there. I was their diversity hire. It was a wild place, Barbies hanging on the ceilings. We worked with supermodels, celebrities. I mean, it was wild. And then I would go do photo shoots at night. Long story short, I ended up kind of working my way up, and I had a very famous model client that I gave a makeover to and changed her look and opened up Women's Wear Daily the next day. And a very, very famous older hairdresser, probably considered one of the best hairdressers in history, took credit for my work. And it killed every desire I had to stay in that industry. And so I started looking for a way out. Well, in that time, I had been to a couple of rehabs. I went to a rehab. I was actually picked up for a reality show about an interventionist, and the producers of, I think it was like Extreme Makeover maybe, or The Swan, one of those. They came, and I was going to be the pilot episode. So they came, they interviewed me, they took me to a rehab, gave me a camera. And I was going to be on this reality show and spent 4 months at a very famous rehab facility, the cost of which is probably about $150,000. It's probably closer to $200,000 in today's money, I'm sure. And the show never ended up airing. I either dodged a bullet or I extended my addiction, one of the two. But after that, that's when I went back to New York and really dove into my hairdressing career. And I, went through that. And then somewhere along the way, obviously that incident happened with the hairdresser, and I lost my passion for it. Within that time, after getting out of that rehab, I decided that physical health and wellness was going to be my strategy to stay sober. So I had taken a jiu-jitsu class, and I thought that was going to be the thing, but I couldn't find a jiu-jitsu school. But I found a gym, I found a program, I started lifting. And then I was introduced to a great friend of mine, Sean Heisen, who was the editor at Muscle and Fitness. And we started working out together. He became one of my best friends and just taught me everything about fitness. Ended up, giving me work as a writer in the fitness world. And then I began personal training and slowly transitioned out of hair into becoming a personal trainer, working as a fitness tech for Men's Health or Men's Fitness, working as a writer for a variety of magazines, and eventually opening up my own private studio in Brooklyn, New York. The private studio I opened happened to be in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym that I had become more involved in, and that became the outlet that I'm sure all of you are sick of hearing me talk about now, but it's become one of the most important things that I've ever done. It really checks all the boxes for me in terms of physicality, emotionality, and intellectual interest. And so in that, I opened up that, I became a fitness guy. And eventually, as we've noticed the trends here, is I moved into nutrition coaching. And I worked for my good friend Mike, who I co-host The Macro and the Mindset with, his company Stronger You. I was so engrossed in that I ended up closing up my private studio and going solely online as a nutrition coach. Well, working in nutrition, and specifically in the macro kind of community, I started to see some deficits in people. And it seemed that it was just not sustainable. People were not keeping the weight off. And the things that people were struggling with were much less about food and much more about all these other things. And I started to think, like, hey, maybe the food, maybe the weight, maybe this is a symptom and not the cause. And I was like, we keep trying to attack this thing with a logical process, and yet this seems to be an emotional problem. And so where are we seeing that disconnect? So as I moved through this, I decided I wanted to start to take a different tack. So I started taking on very difficult clients. They're stronger you. I started working with the people that nobody wanted to work with. And most importantly, I flew out to Kansas City to meet with, to see at a conference, a woman by the name of Dr. Lisa Lewis, who works as a psychologist, but also has an ancillary connection to fitness, as her husband was Tony Gentlecore, is Tony Gentlecore, who is a very famous fitness writer, coach, trainer, seminar giver. Like he does everything, and very well respected, very well known. So she was intimately aware of what goes on in fitness. So same as I did in hair, I approached her and said, listen, I want to learn from you. What can I do? And she's like, I don't really do that. I don't understand. And so like everything else, I just bugged her until she said yes. I believe that was probably 7 years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And we're still working together today. And that was another pivotal moment for me as I started to ask her to teach me about, the scope and practice of what I can do for my clients from a behavioral standpoint. And behavioral psychology became my interest, um, much to the happiness of my mother, who is a psychologist, or was. She's now retired, worked at Hopkins Bayview for many, many years. And that is, so there was a natural inclination for me to end up in this work, even though I resisted everything about it most of my life, because as the mother of a psychologist, um, if there was one thing I was really good at, it was that I could beat every psychologist I went in to see. I would win at therapy. They couldn't crack me if they tried, which I thought was a win. I didn't realize that that is not actually the point of therapy. It is to go in and be open yourself. And once I was able to open, I was able to start to see a lot more of myself, a lot more understanding of who I am from a lot of different ways. And it helped me become a much better coach and helped me to develop the model that I have today. Hey there, it's Jeb. I want to take a quick moment to talk about something that might just change your life. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're someone who's ready for something different. Maybe you've been feeling stuck in your relationship with food, your body, or even your sense of self. Maybe you've tried all the diets, read all the books, and still feel like something's missing. That's where Food on the Mind comes in. At Food on the Mind, we don't believe in one-size-fits-all solutions. Instead, we focus on helping you understand the deeper why behind your struggles and giving you the tools to create real, sustainable change. Whether it's breaking free from emotional eating, building a healthier relationship with food, or recovering your confidence, we're here to guide you every step of the way. Working with me isn't about willpower or perfection. It's about curiosity, compassion, and transformation. Together, we'll dive into the practical tools and deeper insights that help you move forward, not just with food, but with life. And the best part, you don't have to figure it out on your own. With one-on-one coaching, group programs, and resources designed to fit your unique journey, Food on the Mind is here to help you step into your power and create a life that feels truly worth living. So if you're ready to take that first step, head over to my website at foodonthemind.com to learn more, or connect with me on social media, Jeb Stuart Johnston. I'd love to hear from you and how I can support your journey. Because at the end of the day, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to start. And I'm here to help you do exactly that. So, that whole process of going through now, around that time, before I met Lisa, right before is when I did quit drinking this time and finally get sober in a lasting, sustainable way. And those things are not, mutually exclusive, right? Those are very intertwined. The personal work that I did while recovering from addiction, instead of just trying to quit and thinking that letting go of the substance was what was going to cure me, I learned that the substance itself was simply a symptom of the obsession that I felt in so many other areas and the inability to control a chaotic world. When I the first time I quit drinking, I went through a very terrible spell of OCD that was almost crippling, where I almost couldn't leave the house. And again, this comes back to this idea of control. I saw a world that was out of control. I was angry at it. I saw so much hypocrisy. I saw so much injustice. And I had, tried to formulate a life in which I could, support and fight for the little guy, and just never knew how. And once I found this path, this purpose, I started to see how I could help people who felt left behind. And this is very interesting, because a lot of these people are very successful in life, but they're still being fed the same narrative that they should be able to do it on their own, that it's all their fault, that everything they do is caused by them. And no one has recognized the influence of the surroundings, the hierarchy that we live within, the not just the food environment, which is what fitness likes to focus on, but the environment of the world, the messaging that we get constantly, the even the well-meaning people who talk about personal development often come back to this idea. It's like where they say there's no one coming to save you. Like, that's a terrible, terrible thing to think of. In reality, we should all be trying to save each other. We should all be lifting each other up. We think of ourselves as these lost, lonely islands, and that's why we're so miserable in America. The rest of the world recognizes the power of the collective. It's just how we got to where we are, yet we seem caught up and fixated with this idea that the Lone Ranger, the lone cowboy is who's going to do it, and and we keep putting these people on pedestals, and I think we're learning that they're not superhuman, and in fact they might be the worst of us more and more. I'm talking about the billionaires in particular. If you're listening to this podcast and you're a fan of billionaires, you're probably not going to love it, because I am going to talk about how they shouldn't exist. Not that they shouldn't exist as humans, but as hoarders of wealth and inequality. I don't believe that it is beneficial for the planet. So with that out of the way, thinking about this idea, how I went from a songwriter, an observer, like that was my first passion. I still write songs every day. I've always been an observer of human behavior, and I'm fascinated by it. Space is cool. I'm not super interested in that, because I think there's so much crazy that goes on inside of our heads. I'd rather explore in between someone's ears than go to Pluto. That's it for me. And so through that process, as an actor, I had to learn what motivation really meant, of why a character would do something, embodying something and becoming that person. And as a bartender and nightclub manager, I was literally playing a role every night, depending on where I was working. And it's funny, because like managing clubs and bars was not enjoyable for me. Bartending was. I have a desire of kind of this blue collar idea of like, I want work to be work. Again, working online, doing this stuff, it's fun. Like creating content, it's fine. It's not my passion. Working with clients is my passion. I want to talk to people. I like those days when I've got calls all day and I'm just working with people in the trenches. And then I became a celebrity and fashion hairdresser, and I'll tell you, that is a blue collar job. You are gonna leave the day beat up, tired, and you're using your hands. And it led me to understand that art is blue collar. Art is working with your hands. Art is not passive, and yet we try to elevate our lives to a world of art, and by thinking we're going to do it without getting our hands dirty. And so that's going to be a theme that you'll see that will come up quite a bit in this podcast. And so, again, that's why I became a coach. And then why did I get my board certification for health and wellness? Well, I don't have a formal education. I am a published researcher. I've been asked to work on a lot of higher level certifications. I'm super flattered by the way I've been embraced by the industry, even without my lack of a formal education. And that has always been my Achilles heel. It's something I'm very sensitive about. And so when I saw this board certification, I realized there is an ethics valuation there. There is a certification that is not a weekend, right? This thing took a year to do. Very intense. It was a 4-hour test, which I know is not a big deal for most boards, but I think you have 8 hours to do it. I'm a pretty quick test taker. And so all of these things combined felt that it was a little bit more than just having a nutrition certificate. Not that it really matters to most clients, but it mattered to me. And so that's why I pursued that. I wanted the ethics board. I wanted to have a board that would hold me accountable for the things that I do. Each chapter of these parts of my life contributed heavily to who I am today. I wouldn't change a thing. It's been varied. It's been crazy. And there's at no point that I can ever say that I look back on my life and say it's been boring, chaotic, messy. I've been to jail quite a few times. I've been to quite a few rehabs. I've been bankrupt. It's been a wild life. And I wouldn't trade it for the world, because I got to tell you, I've come out of it rather unscathed. I'm not ever going to look back on my life and say, wow, I really wish I would have lived a little more, because I definitely did that. And so this portion of my life is about giving back. I took a lot in my youth, and now I'm at a place that I want to contribute more to making this world a better place. And I had to go through a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, addiction, jail, being an angry person, violence both committed at me and by me. Those things were necessary for me to understand the human condition in a way that I can help best. And that's how I look at it. So 2024 was, that curiosity I talked about. It led me to embracing vulnerability and openness in a way I had not before. I would say I was vulnerable because I'm very much an open book. I'll talk about any of my problems, but that's because I don't view them as negatives. I look at everything as just being kind of neutral, and it led me to where I am. But this spiritual openness, I've always, I grew up relatively, I would say, agnostic, if not atheist. My parents both grew up religious. My dad understood, he read the Bible, knew it better than 99% of people who would call themselves Christian did. And even in rehab, he sent me a huge letter that was basically his summation of the Sermon on the Mount, which I still treasure today. I mean, it's really amazing. And when I was young, I actually played Jesus in a run of Godspell. Fun fact: I also did LSD and played Jesus on stage while I was tripping, and that death scene of me dying and being resurrected was very, very interesting with that happening. And that actually sparked a lot of spiritual interest in me, was psychedelics in the 90s. And as I dropped those behind and felt that was too much weakness, I became more embroiled in alcohol and escaped into this angry, bitter place that eschewed spirituality. I went to a music school that also was Baptist affiliated and very, very, very evangelical Christian. And I have family that's evangelical Christian, and I saw the hypocrisy and the closed-mindedness within that community, and it really turned me off to religion. So I spent much of my life hating the idea of God or religion or anything like that. And in this work, I began working with people who were deeply religious, and I had to suspend that judgment, and I had to become curious, and I had to find what the beauty was in religion, and not focus on how people screw it up, but rather why they want to approach it in the first place. And I would say that this past year led me from being what I would call an atheist to at least an agnostic, thinking that there is something greater and not sure what that is, but not sure that it really matters. I think the idea that a human would have a concept of what God is kind of defeats the purpose of what God is. It should be something that is impossible to conceive of, in my mind. But I started to understand why people who are Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, I had always kind of fallen a little bit more partial to Buddhism, just because it matched my values and didn't seem quite as dogmatic. Judaism, why are they drawn to these things, these rituals, these rules, these disciplines? And I realized it was very much like what I needed to get myself out of addiction. And that was a discipline, a structure, a set of rituals that marked the passage of time, but also allowed me the structure to create freedom in my thoughts, in this high in our head, so that it wasn't completely filled with obsession all the time. And so with that, that realization, that time spent this year focusing on that spiritual self, that time spent focusing on expanding who I am, and talking to clients about that idea of expansion, right? Of not trying to be smaller to make the world happier, but rather being yourself, being the biggest version of you, and giving that to the world. That's what made me want to relaunch this podcast in concert with what I do professionally. And so, what is it that I do at Food on the Mind? Well, I'm really helping people to break free from obsession, right? We say food obsession, but in emotional eating, but it's really about getting rid of anything that takes up too much of that pie. I want people to kind of rediscover their potential and to create a life worth living. This idea is that we don't have to create something new. It's all inside of us. We just have to awaken it. And I work with a lot of professionals, people in academia, generally people who are attorneys or C-suite, or really anyone who is interested in changing, but they tend to be people who have an intellectual curiosity. It's just who I attract. It's probably because that's what I'm interested in. And so that's who I tend to work with. But I've worked with everyone, every type of personality and career type you could imagine. So the framework that I work in, when we talk about Food on the Mind, is the Awakened Genius Blueprint. That is my kind of comprehensive model that has come from the study and the research and the work that I've done in a few different modalities, primarily being just an understanding of basic psychology, things like self-determination theory and trans-theoretical model of change, and how to utilize motivational interviewing, understanding the concepts of how these things affect the human condition and motivation in particular. But then my model is really rooted in these kind of ideas of parts work, which comes from internal family systems. Did some coursework with them over the past couple of years. Got pretty deep into understanding that, and was able to pull out a conceptual model that works within coaching that is not therapy. It's more of learning to guide oneself in the understanding of the different parts that make up our personalities. And then from a strategic standpoint and how to regulate your emotions, I work mainly from skills from dialectical behavior therapy. Again, because it's skill-based, it's not really therapy. We're utilizing skills to start to learn how to manage emotions in a way that is not condemning them or shutting them down, but rather just learning to live alongside them and how to utilize them. And I think that is kind of where the basis comes from. I do believe that my next deep dive is going to be within polyvagal theory, mainly because I think that all of these mechanisms of emotional eating and food addiction and addiction in general are these attempts from our system to regulate a nervous system that is out of control because of the environment we live in. We're unable to regulate it on its own. So how do we do it? We do it with these tools that push us into a different state of autonomic nervous system response, and we end up stuck in that cycle because it's the only way we know how. And so now I'm starting to not just utilize these psychological, behavioral, cognitive models, but also can we start to bring in the physiological aspect of your body in order to help kind of cover all aspects of change. And that's where that mind, body, spirit idea comes in. So again, parts work is what I talk about. And I break it down as demons, right? We all have our demons. And the way that I say it to people that simplifies this really well is when you're talking, you're like, hey, do you want to go out to eat? And be like, part of me wants to go to, McDonald's. Be like, oh, that's interesting. A part of you. We already recognize that we have these parts. We just do it subconsciously. We don't even recognize it. But I coin them as demons because most people look at it as these parts that are blocking us, right? It could be your self-critic. It could be your inner rebel. It could be the perfectionist. But these parts, these demons, aren't actually bad. They're protective. And the reason I brought up demons was because I was thinking about this concept and how to break it down and make it simpler for people. And I saw that the etymology of demon is daemon, which is a Greek word meaning deity or genius. within these demons that you have, these things that are holding back, is your genius. That perfectionist learned early on, don't waste time doing things that you're not already good at, because it is not going to help you to move forward with your goals. So you only do things you're really good at. And if you're not, you throw them away. That's a superpower. It's just that when you have to approach something that you might not be good at, now you're stuck because you don't know how to work in a way that doesn't allow for perfection, right? Now, if we can figure out the genius within that demon, though, all of a sudden you have an ally versus an adversary, and you become unstoppable. And that's where we kind of bring in the parts work. Our strategic skills are really just practical tools, right? It's simple things to manage your emotions and behaviors. And then we use all the other stuff to help drive motivation, to make it feel internal, so that it's not something that you're constantly thinking about, that it's not something that the external world is driving, but rather it's you in the driver's seat and moving that thing. So again, why did I relaunch this? It's really because I want to create some meaningful conversations about health, mindset, and personal growth. It's going to be talking about emotional eating, talking about motivation, talking about mindset transformation. We're going to discuss a lot about spirituality, because clearly that's been a big area of growth for me this year. And within that, philosophy. What is the deeper meaning of life? What did different philosophers throughout history have to say about this? How can we equate that to our current state? And then the deeper meaning of health. Like, health is not six-pack and a ton of muscle, even though that's what everyone would have you believe. It's much greater than that. There are plenty of people out there that look like Greek gods that are absolute garbage health, mentally, physically, but they look really good, and vice versa. There's a lot of people out there that are aesthetically, a little bit overweight, but they're out there moving into their body in a way that is super health seeking. Their mental health is strong. They're eating nutritious foods, right? It's about much more. It's about finding balance. In the future, we're going to delve into some things. I posted something today about why macros fail, and why calorie counting tends to fail in the long term. So I'm going to do an entire episode on that, where I can delve a little bit more deeply in the physiological, the psychological reasons why most people fail at sustaining their results long term with a macro or calorie counting approach. And it's nothing to do with the actual thing itself. It's about all the other stuff. I'm going to talk about the philosophy behind this Awaken Genius Blueprint. Like, why do I do what I do? Why have I developed this model? We'll talk about the spiritual intersection between health and wellness. How does that? Why does that matter? And we'll talk a lot about autonomy, competence, relatedness. All those things are going to tie in. And I'm going to talk about art, because I think art and creativity are the windows into spirituality. I think it is our connection with something greater. People think of religion and spirituality as being connected, but religion is just the rule book for those who wrote the rules. The deeper connection is art. Is that thing that comes to us in a way that we can't even explain, and touches us in a way that we can't even explain. We're going to talk about relationships, the most important thing in my life, and I think the most important thing in life in general. Like, what are we here for? We are here to make connections and to better the world through our relationships. And we'll talk about the psychology of change. Psychology and philosophy are kind of cousins to me, and they are passions of mine that I want to talk about. I'm going to have some guests occasionally. Most of this is going to be me talking. And maybe I'll throw out some like Q&A days where like you have some Q&As, but I will have some guests. The reason it's mainly just me is because I want to be able to do this at the same time every week. And if I can have someone join me, cool. But I don't want to have this become a platform to improve my reach because of somebody else. This is about me giving out my ideas and hoping they resonate with you and can help you along in your journey. Not about just having people come on and talk about, where they're from, what they do. I love guest podcasts. I'm a guest on podcasts all the time. They become a little repetitive, though, because I'm going to come on and spend 20 minutes telling you about my history, and that's what this episode's for, so you never have to listen to it again. And so I will have guests. They're probably going to be people that aren't really in the fitness industry, and probably people you haven't ever heard of, even if they are, because the most interesting people that I have come across are definitely not the most popular. Because what I found is that popularity, social media notoriety, generally comes with a very either low level understanding of topics, um, a high level of I don't want to say dishonesty, but maybe just narcissism, and generally not interesting to me. There's a lot of people who you've never heard of who I've encountered that are the real geniuses out there, the people that are pushing the boundaries, the people that think crazy. And to be honest, that's who I like to talk to. So that's who I'm going to talk to more of. But that doesn't mean that some of the people won't be. I mean, I have some friends that are also popular that are also very very interesting. But for the most part, it'll probably be limited in the guest appearances. So, I hope that this is something that you have enjoyed listening to. I know it was very long-winded and talk. It'll be more informational in the future, but I wanted you to understand why I'm coming back to this and why I'm recreating this podcast and what it is that I hope to get out of it. And I will try to keep it short. I think a half hour to 45 minutes of me talking is probably plenty. This was a long one because, again, my story alone is like a 10-hour journey that I just breezed over in this. So I hope that you'll enjoy this. I hope you'll join me in this journey. I'm really excited about it. When I launched Food on the Mind, my goal to myself was to write a blog post and send out an email every day for a year. And I completed that, and it was transformational in who I am. And so now my goal this year is with this podcast is to do a podcast episode every week. If I have to miss a week for travel or something, I'm going to try to do too. So I would like to make, this happen and have 50 episodes because I'm already a week behind and there'll be a Christmas week. And so I want to do 50 episodes of this year, as well as making sure that consistently I'm doing an episode with Mike over at Macro on the Mindset, because that's very important to me as well. And so for that, I would love to have greater reach and have people actually see this. So if you could subscribe to this, leave a review, preferably 5 stars. Say what you like. Hey, and you know what? If you hate it, say that too, because that's good for my soul. I need to get busted down a peg or two every once in a while. Granted, I have a lot of friends that are glad to do that for me on a regular basis. So you don't really have to. So I would, much prefer the 5 stars and the adulation. As we already established, I spent a lifetime trying to find acceptance. And what is this I'm doing now? I'm pleading in front of you into a microphone and camera to ask you to please like me and tell the world that you do. But yeah, if you could subscribe, leave a review, and share this with people, I would love for that. And know that, I am here. If you want to engage with me, follow me on Instagram at Jeb Stuart Johnston. Follow me on Facebook at Jeb Stuart Johnston. I'm a lot less active there. I kind of send my things over. And I do have a multitude of coaching programs, whether it be the group program, which if you are a member of my group, you do get this podcast early. I'm going to try to get that to my group members on Fridays, and then this will release on Mondays. And I also have within there lots of resources, a weekly Q&A. It's a pretty good deal. And you'll get a lot of benefit out of that, I believe. And then of course I do have both the one-to-one performance mindset coaching, which is really geared towards, athletes and weekend warriors, people who really want to up their performance, who want to, and want kind of more of a traditional nutrition coaching with some of this mindset stuff worked in that also joins the group. You get a part of that group access as well. And then I have my one-to-one coaching that's working directly with me, where we really look at everything to change your life and get rid of obsession. So if you're interested in any of those things, you can. We'll be releasing some courses this year, as well as a mentorship for other professionals who are looking to help their clients manage emotional eating. So any of those things, reach out, let me know. But overall, I just want to say thank you so much for your curiosity and your willingness to explore these topics, and think about this podcast. Like, I know it's just me talking, but I really do feel it's a partnership in growth and self-discovery and building a life worth living, because through all my trials and tribulations, I have built a life that even though at times it's hard as hell, I tell you what, I wake up every day and I love living the life I have. And if it ends tomorrow, I'm proud of the life that I've built. And I would love for everyone to be able to feel that feeling. And And I'm hoping that this conversation and these ideas and these this collaboration that I feel with you as the listener and me as the speaker, maybe can help a few of us get to that place. And I think if I can just help one person, I've made the world a better place in that, and I've done my job and fulfilled my purpose and destiny. So for that, I thank you for being here. Again, like, subscribe, all the things. Share it with your friends, and I can't wait to see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me, with curiosity, with passion, with commitment, with collaboration. I can't wait to see you next time. Have a great week.